Okay, so we finally get to the unboxing of the HiStar Aurora Air. Now this has been sitting on my table for at least a couple of weeks, but I'm really excited to do this video because with this HiStar Aurora Air, we are entering into the next phase of Chinese AliExpress bait finesse reels. So let's quickly get into it. But before I open this box, it literally feels like there's nothing in here. Alright. Now I did a preview of this reel I think a couple of months ago along with another reel, and I found this reel to be more interesting, so I decided to pick this one up instead. Let me move the box out of the way. And boom. Check that out. Oh wow. The side plates are shinier than I thought they would be. I thought they were a matte color, but no, they're shiny. Alright. Smooth enough. But I'm gonna let you guys check this reel out. Let you guys take in all the details. What does that say? I don't know. Alright, so let me know what you think in the comments on the looks of this reel. I'll have to say it looks a lot better than I thought it would based on the pictures. But I'm going to do my normal inspection, check out all its details, and report back to you. So before we get into this, I'm gonna, I guess, briefly explain what I meant by the next phase of Chinese AliExpress BFS reels. Now, if you've been buying bait finesse reels from AliExpress as long as I have, then you notice that their reels come in waves or phases. And in this latest phase, there seems to be a focus on extreme lightweight. And as far as I can see, there are currently 3 reels that are leading the charge in this next phase. And of course, one of them is going to be this HiStar Aurora Air. And then there's going to be the Pure Lure Silver Feather, which I did a preview video on a couple of months ago. And then there's another reel called the Thorns Line Sembo Air, which was on AliExpress, but for some reason I can't find it there anymore. So I'm not sure if that reel is available or not. But one thing all these 3 reels have in common is they're all claiming to have weights of less than 120 grams. So we're talking limit pushing weights. I'm talking reels that could potentially weigh under 4 ounces. And another thing that I've noticed with these reels is that they all seem to be moving away from just a blatant copy of Shimano's FTB braking system. Now, whether that's because Shimano got some lawyers involved and made them stop, or if they were just too lazy to get those brakes to work right. Either way, it looks like over in China they're moving away from making a direct copy of Shimano's FTB magnetic brake system and coming up with their own proprietary brakes. And you can definitely see this in the Aurora Air as well as the Silver Feather. And obviously, out of all these 3 reels, I decided on the Aurora Air, and that's because I thought the brakes were the most interesting. And don't worry, I'll show you the brakes here in a moment. But yeah, we are definitely getting into the next phase of Chinese AliExpress BFS reels. So after inspecting this Aurora Air for quite a few minutes, I found a lot of things I love about this reel and 2 things I don't like about it. So let's go over the likes first. Now the first thing is, this is an extremely good looking reel in my opinion. It's got a nice aggressive asymmetrical shape. As you can see, it's 2-tone, black frame with silver side plates, and in my opinion they did the 2-tone right. Now the frame is a matte black while the side plates are this glossy shiny silver that looks very expensive. It looks high-end, and you can see that the frame itself is pretty detailed, as it's got this concave section that they've machined out. Now my hand is too big to comfortably put my thumb right there, but if you have really small hands, that's a great place to stick your thumb. But I'll be palming it like this. Now the side plates are very sculpted, particularly the palm side plate. You can see all these lines. And this reel has just the right amount of badging. So you got the TBS badging here, Aurora badging there, HiStar right there, got some more writing there, got some badging on the spool tension, some words there, I don't even know what that says, looks to be a different language, some more writing there, but the badging is very subtle, it's not very bright, and you definitely got a lot of badging on this spool. Now the reel itself is made entirely of carbon, so the frame and side plates are carbon, the handle obviously is carbon, it's 80 millimeter, and it looks a lot bigger than it is. I thought it was probably like 90 millimeter, but this reel is really small, and I'll show you just how small in a few minutes. But it's got a lot of nice cool components, like the drag star, very aggressively shaped, and it's kind of like DAIWA Zion, where it's like a raw carbon. Got the subtle trim piece covering the gearbox. Not super fancy, but it's nice. You got your detailed spool tension. It's got some gold anodization rings around it, and it matches up really good with the gold nut retainer. You have a really nice symmetrical thumb bar with some grooves machined into it for grip, and the thumb bar is solid, no mush, no slop. The brake dial has nice big bright numbers, so you can definitely see what brake setting you're in. That's definitely a plus for those of us whose vision isn't that great. And you got these very small FINESSE, extremely soft copies of the DAIWA STEEZ Air knobs, right down to the knob end caps, and they are asymmetrically shaped, so they are very comfortable. And once again, they're a direct copy of the knobs you're going to find on the $500 STEEZ Air. Now the fact that this reel is so small and these knobs are so small, it makes the 80 millimeter handle look much bigger than it is. But trust me, I compared the handle length to other reels and it is 80 millimeters. Now it's got a conical line guide, or a tapered line guide, where the entrance is bigger than the exit, but just barely. So it's not one of these reels that has, you know, that huge triangle pyramid line guide where the entrance is massive. And I mean, it's just barely bigger than the exit, but it's better than nothing. And the Aurora Air comes with 2 out of the 3 clickers. So it's got a drag clicker, or clicking drag star, of course. And this is a nice, positive, solid feeling drag star, very mainstream feeling. But the spool tension does not click. Very surprising, but it is smooth to turn and it does take a little bit of effort. But that of course means the drag clicks. Wow, it's catching up. So this reel comes with quite a lot. And we haven't even got to its 2 best features yet, or I should say 3 best features. But now it's time to go over what I don't like about the reel. Now, first thing is that it's not very smooth. My reel feels very geary, and it might need some grease. I mean, it's smooth in a generic way, but the ante has been upped when it comes to Chinese AliExpress BFS reels. There are a lot of really smooth reels coming out of China, and the Aurora Air, at least my reel, doesn't seem to match the smoothness of previous reels that I've purchased. And the second thing is that my particular reel has a huge amount of handle slop, and not really in and out, but rocking side to side. I don't know if you guys can see that. Like, hopefully the camera's picking it up. It's going like this, like a seesaw. Now, I don't know if it's just my reel or if anyone else who has purchased this reel has that issue, but yeah, I mean, I don't think it's gonna really affect performance, but that is a disappointment. But other than that, the reel is great, especially for its price. So up next, I'm going to show you just how small this reel is. So this Aurora Air is what I would call, I guess, an entry-level AliExpress BFS reel. It's one of the reels that retail in between $70 and $80. So because of that, I'm only going to compare the size of the Aurora Air with other reels in the same price point. So the first reel is going to be the Shanghai Lingle 2. And Lingle 2 is not a big reel by any means, but it is noticeably bigger than the Aurora Air. Now, I know that the white side plates aren't really helping to show the size difference, but trust me, especially when I put them like this, the Aurora Air is much lower. So next up, it's going to be the Black Knight 2 clone, the Dark Wolf Ultra. And they look similar. I know that the silver side plates on the Aurora make it look smaller. Definitely looks smaller from this angle. But when you compare the height of the reels, this Aurora Air is way lower. I'm trying to line up the reel feet here. But the last reel I'm going to compare is going to be KASTKING's Valiant Eagle 2. And they are very similar in size. Looks like the Valiant Eagle 2 may be a little bit wider. Okay, the Valiant Eagle 2 definitely looks bigger from this angle. But yeah, even the tiny Valiant Eagle 2 doesn't appear, well, maybe it does. They are very close in height. But that was one of the big features of this reel, was that the height of the reel is only 36 millimeters. And when comparing it to other reels, like some of the DAIWA BFS reels I have, it is noticeably lower, and you can definitely feel it, just how it just disappears on the reel seat. And it's super comfortable to palm, very light and very low. So this Aurora Air is definitely pushing the limits of how small and palmable a reel can get. So the 3 reels in this current new phase of AliExpress BFS all claim to weigh under 120 grams. So the Silver Feather is supposed to weigh 119 grams. The Sembo Air is supposed to weigh 117 grams. But the Aurora Air is really pushing the limits, and HiStar claims it weighs only 115 grams. So we're definitely going to see if that's true. And boom, Let's weigh that again. So zeroed it out. 114.2 grams. So it's even lighter than they advertised. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna switch this over to ounces, and this may be under, well, no it isn't. It's right at 4 ounces, but I thought that it might slip in at under 4 ounces. So if you were impressed with the weights of reels like the Flight Feather or the Flight Feather Cormorant or KASTKING's Kestrel Elite coming in at a hair under 4.5 ounces, this Aurora Air blows them out of the water, coming in at a full ½ ounce less. And let me tell you, it is super light. That's why I thought the box was empty, because this reel is so light. So very, very impressive. And I expect there's probably going to be a reel that comes in at under 4 ounces sometime in the near future. But for now, this Aurora Air is the lightest reel in the world. So now it's time to get to the spool, which is also pushing limits, as well as that brake system. Okay, so the spool scale's out, and it's time to dive into this limit pushing spool as well as the brake system. And to access, I guess, flip this latch, and I assume it twists, or maybe it just comes out. Yep, it says open. It should twist down. There we go. So the side plate is definitely firmly secure, as you can see. And boom. Check that out. The brakes and the spool. And I love how they have that white writing on it. Wow. Alright, we'll get to the brakes later. But let's get to this spool. Okay. You can see the spool has a ton of writing. Aurora Mini, Hasita. There are no portholes. The center is ported out. Short spool shaft, which is made of aluminum. Very small bearing. And let's see here. Capacity, braid, 0.12 millimeter, 190 meters. So if you use thin braid, this holds quite a bit. But yeah, it is pretty shallow. And what the big deal about this spool is that it's supposed to be only 27 millimeters. Now, I mistakenly said that DAIWA started the tiny spool revolution with the STEEZ Air, but actually I was wrong. It was Shimano way back in 2009 with its Cardiff DC that had a spool of 29 millimeters, which I think is probably the first BFS reel with a spool under 30 millimeters. Then of course DAIWA took it further with the STEEZ Air in 2020, making a 28 millimeter spool. But this Aurora Air is supposed to only have a 27 millimeter spool. But before we check that out, we're gonna get a weight. All right, so it's only supposed to weigh 4.4 grams with the bearing, I think 4.36. So even lighter than advertised. So of course what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna attempt to take off that small bearing. So luckily I was able to pretty easily take this bearing off because there was no kind of O-ring obstruction. But just taking a look at this bearing, it's really, really small. I might even consider it micro. But with the bearing being so small, I doubt that this spool is going to set any kind of new spool weight record. But let's just see what the scale says. What? 3.437. So this is actually either lighter or just as light as the spools on the Flight Feather and the Flight Feather Cormorant. So this bearing was heavier than I thought, coming in at a gram. So yeah, this is definitely a really, really pleasant surprise. So what I have in my hand is the spool of my DAIWA Gekabijin Air, which is 28 millimeters. And here's a spool of the Aurora Air, which is supposed to only be 27 millimeters. So let me know in the comments, does it look like it's a little smaller? To me it does. It's very hard to tell. I'm gonna actually flip the spool over, but it's very subtle. It looks like the spool on the Aurora might be a little smaller. And how I'm gonna check is, hopefully this will work, but I don't know if this is really gonna prove it or not. Nope, it doesn't. But if this frame was drilled out to only accept 27 millimeters, then this spool would not fit, but it fits pretty perfectly. And I wish I had some digital calipers, because as you can see by that graphic I showed you earlier, a lot of the information on HiStar's website about the reel is conflicting. So unless I get some digital calipers, there might not be a real way to tell if this spool is 27 millimeter. I mean, it looks smaller there when you compare it like this. Let me get another reel out, hold on. So I pulled out the spool of the Valiant Eagle 2, which is also 28 millimeters, and it looks so close. But if you really concentrate, maybe the Aurora Air spool is visibly smaller. I mean, how can you really visually tell 1 millimeter difference? But let me know in the comments which spool you think is smaller, and do you think that this spool is actually 27 millimeter? So now let's get to that brake system. So are you guys ready for even more confusion? Now, if you look at the side plate, you can see that printed on the side plate it says Turbo Brake System, or TBS for short. Now, Turbo Brake System is a moniker that has been slapped on many AliExpress FINESSE reels. But if you look on HiStar's website, they call this thing the 3-blade dart system. So I'm gonna call this the 3-blade dart system. For one, it sounds cooler, and for two, HiStar actually created an entire symbol and graphic for it. Now, when I did the preview on this reel and I was just studying the pictures, there was one question in my mind, and that was, is this a dynamic or static system? Now, if you study the brake assembly closely, you'll see that while it's not a direct copy of Shimano's FTB, it's very similar in the fact that the magnets affect the spool on the inner portion. And as you can see, there's 3 banks of 2 magnets. Now, after playing with this brake system for a few minutes and making a few adjustments, let me show you what I found out. So, if you can see here, there are these numbers and these arrows. So it says 3, 2, 1, 0, and of course these arrows going opposite directions. And if you take a look at, hopefully the camera will focus, you can see that there is some edges or some grip machined into this top part of the brake system, which is aluminum. So you can manually twist this top part to go from 3 to 2, 2 to 1, and 1 to 0. So what does that do? What does twisting this dial to these different numbers do? And let me tell you, the build refinement on this brake system is not so good. Hopefully they'll be able to improve it in the future. But what I thought was that by going from 3 to 2 to 1 to 0, that it would pop one of these brake banks out. At least that's what it looked like according to the graphics on HiStar's website. But it turns out I was wrong. So if you take a look, you don't see any brakes popping out, and we're on setting 2, so let's go to 3. So no brake banks popped out. 2, no brake banks popped out. 1, nothing. 0, nothing. So what do these adjustments do? Well, it turns out that this appears to be a dynamic brake system, and all 3 of these little bank of magnets are spring loaded. I don't know if you guys can see, but there's a tiny spring right there shining. And by turning this adjustment, you can either activate or deactivate the dynamic portion of each brake or magnet bank. So that's really cool. So China is definitely coming out with some very original braking systems, and let's test it out. So as you can see right now, the internal brake setting is set to 0, and according to HiStar, that means all 3 magnet banks should be able to move or pivot. So let's test that out. Okay, there's 1. There's 2, that one moves. And there's 3. Okay, so now we're going to turn the dial to 1, and you can tell you're on 1 due to this silver circle here. And according to HiStar, that means only 2 magnet banks should be pivoting or moving. So let's see. So this one appears to be moving. Okay, so it looks like this is the one that, while it does move due to tolerances, doesn't move up and down or in and out quite as much as the other magnet banks. So going to 2 means that only 1 magnet bank should be pivoting, and then going to 3 means that none of them should be pivoting. So that is cool. I really like that. And the magnets do appear to be pretty strong. Now it's kind of backwards, because you would think that going to 3 would give you more brakes, but apparently that's going to give you the least amount of brakes, and going to 0 is going to give you the most braking. And of course, this entire assembly moves in and out according to this dial. So right now it's popped out as far as it'll go because we're on 5. And let's see if I can bring it to 0. There we go. So you can see the lower I go in the numbers all the way down to 0, the more it retracts. So that's awesome. I really like that system. Something new and innovative, and not just some blatant ripoff of a Japanese technology. Now the question is, of course, with any Chinese AliExpress BFS reel, is whether these brakes are going to be strong enough out in the field. And of course we're going to find out. So what can I say about this HiStar Aurora Air other than wow? I am pleasantly surprised and really for the most part pleased with the reel. Now, as we can see, this reel is really pushing the limits when it comes to not only bait finesse but just reels in general. It's knocking on the door of being the first reel to come in at under 4 ounces. It looks really good. The spool is at least tied with the Flight Feather Cormorant and the Flight Feather as being the lightest stock spool in the world. But unlike the Flight Feather and the Cormorant, the spool diameter is supposed to be much smaller, and it comes with these really innovative brakes that take Shimano's FTB concept one step further. So on paper, this reel is the most advanced bait finesse reel in the world, but it doesn't really reflect that in the price, as it's on HiStar's website right now for I think like $76. And the build quality is top notch for the most part. I mean, the frame is solid, no creaky noises when I'm squeezing. Now of course, it's not the smoothest reel, but it is acceptable. And of course, I told you that my particular reel has the sloppy handle tolerance, and I'm wondering if that's just my reel. Now if anyone else has this reel, let me know if your tolerances are sloppy in the handle like mine, and if your reel doesn't feel as smooth as some other reels in its price class, let alone more expensive reels. So of course the next thing to do is to string this reel up, and while I don't expect this reel to be able to cast super long distances with its tiny spool, I'm definitely thinking this reel should set a new standard in casting the 1 gram trout magnet, and possibly lures even lighter than that, as HiStar has claimed this reel can cast down to 0.4 grams. Now, I will say this to you guys who are wanting to buy this reel. If you go on HiStar's website, there's another reel that looks pretty much exactly like this reel, but it appears to be based on the old Fishbane GH100 frame. That means that frame is going to be much bigger, much taller, much heavier, and the spool is going to be much bigger and heavier as well. But they share pretty much the same two-tone color scheme. So be sure, if you're looking for the Aurora Air, that you're actually buying the right model. And I'm not sure why HiStar chose to make the two reels look so similar, but as long as you're getting the reel with the 3-dart brake system, the super tiny spool, and I believe the thumb bar that goes all the way across, then you have the right one. And the Aurora Air is more expensive than that other one. So the next time you see this reel, it's going to be mounted on probably one of my Mavlos plumes, and we're going to be throwing the 1 gram trout magnet. So be on the lookout for that. Alright guys, thanks a lot.